Hi, you're listening to Immigrant Women Talk podcast, and I'm your host, Galina Villaeva. This is the place for you to get inspired by stories of immigrant women, to learn about nonprofits that serve immigrant communities, and to listen to entrepreneurs who work with women in developing countries. Subscribe to this podcast and get more inspiration and resources at immigrantwomentalk.org. Hi, I'm Galina Villaeva, and my guest today is Sarah Koch, co-founder and executive director of DIG, Development in Gardening. And DIG's mission is to improve the nutrition and health of HIV-affected and at-risk populations through sustainable gardening. Hi, Sarah. Great to have you here.
It's great to be here. How are you?
Good. So, Sarah, I have so many questions for you, and the first one is, where is DIG based, and where does it operate?
Yeah, so Development in Gardening is based in the U.S. We have an office in Atlanta, Georgia, but all of our work happens abroad. We work mostly within the context of sub-Saharan Africa. So currently we have projects in Burkina Faso, Kenya, and Uganda, but we've worked in other countries within the continent.
Yeah, but I also saw that you have some work going on in Latin America.
A little bit, not much. There were some early projects that we sort of tested to see how our model worked there, and they worked well. But because we're a small grassroots nonprofit, we need to really focus in a certain area first. And so the need in Africa is so great, and all of the complexities that contribute to the problem are found in sub-Saharan Africa. So we decided to focus there for now, but with hopes of expanding beyond the continent sometime soon.
Of course. So, but even, I saw that there's so many countries that in Africa that you work in, and that's very impressive because they probably have very difficult political structure and social structure. And what is it like to run this organization in different countries?
Yeah, I think, that it's definitely true that every site that we work in, even within a single country, is unique and different and has its own challenges. We tend to not work in too many politically unstable countries, just because that's a challenge that would be even more difficult for us to manage. But the biggest challenges that we have are the environmental changes, just the needs of that particular community. So we'll work with a group of orphans at an orphanage, or we'll work at a hospital that is, working with hundreds or thousands of HIV patients who come and go, and their needs are always very different. So the important thing is connecting to the community and really understanding what it is that they're looking to gain out of the project, and figuring out with them how to create a program and design a program that's going to meet their unique needs. And that takes time, and it takes knowing the community and connecting with the right local people on the ground to make sure that we're addressing the right thing. Right.
So you basically co-create this program for specifically for every community together.
Exactly. Yeah.
So when you first approached people in these communities, did they understand what you were trying to do? What was their reaction?
Well, again, it's different because we don't come in as an outsider completely on our own. We're always sort of invited in from our partners. Partnership is a big part of our core values and who we are. Usually we're well received. But, the need different and the communities are different. And so it's always got its unique piece to it.
Right. So what are your most successful programs?
Being a small startup, we've learned a lot along the way. We started this organization in 2006 when I was finishing the Peace Corps, which is a U.S. program through our government. And, I was very naive at that time, and we learned a lot, and we've gotten better at what we do since then. So we've been operating for about 8 years now. And the projects that we're currently doing, I'm really excited about, but some of our early on projects are still really thriving and growing beyond what we initially expected or even hoped for. Our very first pilot project, which was at the Hospital Fan in Dakar, Senegal, was really just sort of all it was meant to do was to provide food for the patients. And we transformed the co-founder, Steve Bollinger, and I, really him, transformed this space behind the hospital. And when we left, it was growing about 400 pounds of vegetables every month that would go straight into the patients' diets and into their meals. And today, the reports back from the hospital staff are saying that the garden has actually expanded and it's growing more like 2,000 pounds of vegetables every month. So that's a pretty exciting project to know that was our very first project, and it's still really thriving and growing in ways that we never expected. But our projects today, a lot of them, like what we're doing in Kenya, in Luwala with a partner that we have there, the Luwala Community Alliance, we've really worked to create a demonstration garden that has branched out into the community in different ways. So we have this core demonstration garden at the hospital, but it's inspired school gardens that have their own programming through us and through the school systems there. We have community gardens that are not connected to any facility because some of the people in the community really have a difficult time through finding transportation and getting to the hospital demonstration site. So it's trying to figure out how to really look at community transformation instead of just what can we do at a facility for the individuals that facility serves. So I'm really excited about both designs and how both designs are really relevant and making important changes for the communities they serve.
Right. So what DIG does is you help these patients and people in these communities have their own gardens, right, and start their own businesses selling vegetables.
Yeah, I mean, and that varies. So a lot of the places where we work, in urban contexts, perhaps the clients that we work with have been disconnected from agriculture. They've been living in the city for a generation or two, and so they don't have the space, or they don't feel they have the space to actually grow anything. And so we'll try and work with them to see how they can use even small spaces to become productive growing spaces. But a lot of the projects that we work with are actually in the rural context with farmers who have always farmed and are farming before we came in. And it's helping them sort of reconnect with traditional growing techniques that are more sustainable, using fewer chemicals, or we teach no chemicals. And how to nourish the soil. A lot of the places where we work, their land is so small that they grow consistently crop after crop, and they're not necessarily giving back to the soil. So they've really mined the soil of its nutrients. And so we're looking at how to be more climate resilient. And then once those sort of techniques are adopted and embraced, then it's really looking, and it's kind of all at the same time, but looking at how smallholder farming can actually be seen as a business and how it can affect economic change for the family.
Right. So, but you were 24, right, when you decided to start this organization?
Yeah, 24 or 25, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it started with you going to Africa with Peace Corps, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And why did you decide to do it, and what resources did you need to get started?
Yeah, well, I sort of fell into this. There were two co-founders, myself and another Peace Corps volunteer, Steve Bollinger, who I mentioned before. And Steve came from a very different background. He grew up on a farm. He was always very good with agriculture. And so it was really his Peace Corps service that inspired our work. And he invited me to come along on the journey and design the program. And I was really hesitant at first because I didn't feel that I had the skills, being so young and being very inexperienced in agriculture, very inexperienced in nonprofits, and how to, do anything from write a newsletter to host a fundraiser to, manage an organization, especially an international organization. So I really was very hesitant when I started. but along the way found that I actually had a lot of the skill sets that were needed. And the biggest one was that I was enthusiastic and interested in trying to figure it out. And we had a lot of really great people along the way who were kind of mentors for me and saw the strength in the vision and wanted to see that vision succeed. And so helped me figure out what to do and how to do it so that we could survive this long.
Awesome. So how did you get funded in the very beginning?
The very, very beginning, we had a small grant through another organization. So Family Health International had received a big grant from USAID, and they were interested in nutrition for people living with HIV, but they weren't exactly sure how to implement the grant. And so we just happened to be in the right place at the right time and talked to the right people and got a very small portion of that. So we got about $5,000 to do our first program. And we came back to the U.S. and we fundraised with some of our friends and family to get the rest of the support. And at the time, we didn't collect any salaries. It was just like, what do we need to do the project? And slowly we found that our concept was really effective. It was really needed. A lot of people started reaching out to us to do similar programs for their communities. And that's just sort of how it started.
Right. And how did you survive financially?
I moved back in with my parents. There was a little bit of a humbleness to it, but at the time, and especially at the time of my life, it was okay. I had been gone for 2 years in Africa, and my parents were happy to have me home. And
that's a good strategy.
Yeah, it was a good place for me to come back and sort of settle myself and not be too concerned with all of the challenges of just living. It allowed me to focus on this work that I really wanted to do. So, yeah.
So, Sarah, knowing everything that you know now, what would you do differently starting out this organization?
Wow. I don't know. It's good that I didn't know all that I know now at the beginning, because, challenges come slowly and you sort of deal with the challenge at hand as it's presented before you. And had I known, all of the challenges that the organization would have and those very, very, very lean times where I wasn't sure we were going to survive financially or, that was all before us. As far as what would I do differently, I don't know that I would do that much differently. It's been a very slow growing organization. We've been very purposeful with our resources because resources don't come easily to us. We're kind of a strange, what do you do with us? We're not a big organization. We're not a tiny, tiny organization. And I think that that's been good. I don't really know that I would change that much.
Right. So, Sarah, you mentioned one person that you work with, but I know that from your website that you have so many passionate people working on this cause.
Yeah.
So how do you guys attract more people to work with you, and how do you retain them?
Yeah, no, and that's just been a blessing. We have found the right people, and the right people have found us. We've had a lot of people reach out to us with interest in interning or volunteering, working for us. And I think the reason is that DIG is working in a way that's really unique in the quote unquote development world. We're very much hands-on. It's a very understandable mission. People, at least in the US, are very passionate about agriculture and the slow food movement and the power that food has on our health. And so I think there's just a lot of really amazing visionaries who want to be a part of that and see DIG as a way to use their skills towards the same vision that they have for their work and their lives. And so that's been really wonderful from the state side. And then on the host country national, the African side, we've had just amazing, and I don't know how it's happened. You just try to find the right leaders in the community, people who know how to communicate, people who are honest, who get it, who show up and participate in the program without being paid and without being expected to be paid. And, when you start working with people at that end, and then you see their skills and their talents and their motivation, and then you're in a position where you can actually pay them to work for the organization. It's a really exciting thing. And most of those people really appreciate the opportunity and take it seriously and believe in the work, which is critical. So I think it's been a lot of luck, but also just goes back to the core values of the organization, that they're just really strong and people want to stand behind them.
Mm-hmm. And you also have local facilitators working with you. How did you get them on board?
That's the key to all of our work. We learned early on, and I think it comes from our Peace Corps experience, that it's great that I could go over to Africa and teach all of these things about agriculture, but it's really not as powerful and impactful as someone from their own community teaching them in their own language, with the cultural differences that I don't understand, that they just are, they grew up in. It's key to making the project stick, I think. So we learned early on that local facilitators were critical, and we find them through our projects. So we start working with the community, and we see who are the star leaders, and who just, and pull them up from there. And we've had a lot of success doing that. We love our local facilitators.
Yeah. So your local facilitators, they were previously a part of members of your program, right? And then they...
Yeah, most all of them. Most all of them are, yeah.
Right. So, Sarah, just a couple of questions before we wrap up. How have you tried running these programs in the U.S.?
We've talked a lot about it. It goes back to sort of the need for us to focus our model. The thing is our model is very much scalable. It would have applications most definitely in the United States, and different parts of the world beyond Africa. And I hope that someday that we will move beyond Africa. We've not really tried it here, mostly because our personnel and financial resources don't allow for it. But hopefully someday that we will.
Right. And how do you make sure that DIG is sustainable? It's a nonprofit, right?
It's a nonprofit, yeah. And sustainability for nonprofits is a tough one. Everything that we do in our projects is meant to be self-sustaining. So every dollar that we spend, every, site that we conceptualize, it's all with this idea of longevity. And once we leave, because we always leave, the project should continue. It's harder to plan that for a nonprofit where you are raising funds in a changing economy, and you are, especially for us where we work overseas, it's harder for people to really see and conceptualize our work, because most of our funding, all of our funding right now, comes from the U.S. So we're hoping to branch out and do more funding in the countries where we work, getting the embassies of Kenya and, in Kenya, and the different embassies in Uganda and the place where we're working involved, so that we can be connecting with communities that are actually seeing the work happen in their neighborhoods. But sustainability for a nonprofit is tough. To this point, I'm always sort of amazed and blessed that we've survived, and I think there's just an element of faith that it's, if we're meant to do this work, we'll keep on going. So, but we've made a lot of plans for succession planning of our leaders, and making sure our model is captured and it's strong, and that if we lose one person, the organization doesn't disappear.
Have you seen, you mentioned that you want to attract funding from the local government or embassies. Have you seen that happening for someone else already, for another organization?
Yeah, definitely. And it's definitely, it's definitely possible. And to say that all of our funding comes from the U.S. is actually a little misleading. We do have funding dollars that come through other avenues via the countries that we're working. But it's definitely the way I think a lot of development funding is going, and is an area we need to focus on. So it's definitely possible, and it just requires us to focus on finding those right partners who have the same vision and want to see the work accomplished.
Sarah, how did the funding change with the new economy that we have now?
Yeah, well, for us, I wouldn't say that it really changed because we were a really small organization, fundraising for small dollars before everything sort of fell apart in 2008. And when everything sort of fell apart, we were still fundraising for the same sort of small dollars, and at least from an individual donor sort of basis. And so it didn't really change for us. It meant that we would always need to be very purposeful and strategic and diversify where our funds come from. We've since been able to approach, because we've been around longer, we have more projects to show our success. We've been able to approach larger areas of support. So we've got more foundations supporting us. We have some public funding through the government, the U.S. government, and we have some more substantial individual donors. So it's actually gotten better for us over time. We probably just didn't make huge leaps early on because of the financial situation in the U.S.
So what are the plans of DIG for 2014?
Well, we're going to continue working in the 3 countries, in 3+ countries at a time. So for a while, we were only able to do a country at a time, and now we're doing 3 at a time. So we'll have projects in Burkina Faso, Kenya, and Uganda. And I think it's just, we're going to be continuing to grow the model that we have, try and work in multiple sites at the same time, and make sure that those projects can still be as strong as the ones that we do individually. So that's 2014 for us. We're going to be working a lot in schools, a couple hospitals, and a couple community groups.
Sarah, thank you so much. That was my last question, and thank you so much for spending time with us today. And I think what you're doing is really great, and it was a real pleasure talking to you.
Likewise. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Immigrant Women Talk podcast. I would love to get to know you, so come over to immigrantwomentalk.org and leave a comment. Let me know about your challenges, and I will find an expert who will offer a solution. If you would like to join the community of immigrant women, connect with the guests or with me, go to immigrantwomentalk.org. I'm Galina Bilaeva, and I will talk to you next time.